Beneath the waves lies a forgotten library of human history. For centuries, the deep ocean has guarded ancient secrets that rewrite everything we know about our past. In this exploration, you will gain a complete tour of 25 submerged mysteries, from legendary empires to very real sunken cities. How could an entire metropolis vanish overnight? What incredible machine was lost for 2,000 years? The answers are hidden in the silent world below, waiting to be uncovered. What do you believe is the greatest secret the sea still keeps? The story begins with the greatest legend ever whispered about the sea. For over 2,000 years, the tale of Atlantis has captivated humanity, a haunting promise of a world lost beneath the waves. Its origins are surprisingly precise, found not in ancient folklore, but in the philosophical writings of the Greek thinker Plato. In his dialogues called Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BC, Plato describes Atlantis not as a myth, but as a historical account passed down from his ancestor, the lawmaker Solon. According to the story, Atlantis was a vast and powerful island empire, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Its people possessed technology and architecture far beyond their time, with concentric rings of land and water, grand temples covered in precious metals, and a formidable navy. They were a society of immense wealth and ambition, but also of arrogance. After a failed attempt to conquer ancient Athens, Plato writes, the entire island sank into the ocean, quote, in a single day and night of misfortune, consumed by earthquakes and floods. This vivid, catastrophic end is what cemented Atlantis in our imagination. The search for its real-world location has become a kind of global detective story. Theories place it everywhere from the sunken island of Santorini in the Mediterranean, devastated by a massive volcanic eruption, to the Bahamas, where underwater rock formations like the Bimini Road spark speculation. Some look to the eye of the Sahara, a strange geological feature in Mauritania that resembles Plato's description of concentric rings, while others point to deep-sea anomalies near the Azores in the Atlantic. Yet despite centuries of searching and numerous expeditions armed with sonar and submersibles, no definitive archaeological evidence has ever surfaced. No grand columns, no inscribed tablets, no clear ruins of a metropolis that matches Plato's grandeur have been found on the ocean floor. This enduring absence is precisely what keeps the legend alive. Atlantis exists in the tantalizing space between history and parable, a warning about the fall of civilizations and the power of nature. It inspires not because we have found it, but because the deep, unexplored ocean allows us to believe it might still be there, a ghost in the salt and darkness waiting to be found. Plato's Atlantis may be the most famous legend, but the Pacific holds a monument that refuses to be categorized as either myth or geology. Off the southern tip of Yonaguni Island, Japan, in clear blue water, lies a massive, bewildering structure known as the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered by a local diver in the 1980s, this formation is staggering in scale, rising from the seafloor to within 5 meters of the surface, stretching over 100 meters long and 40 meters wide. What you see is not a collection of scattered rocks, but what looks unmistakably like architecture. There are vast, flat terraces that drop in sharp, clean steps. There are 2 towering pillars side by side. There are long, straight walls meeting at perfect 90-degree corners, and what can only be described as staircases with uniform steps. At the top, a flat platform resembles a ceremonial stage, and nearby, a face-like carving peers from the stone. For those who believe it is man-made, this is the smoking gun of a lost civilization, a complex potentially 10,000 years old, built when sea levels were much lower on what was then dry land. They argue nature does not create such precise angles and repetitive patterns. The counter-argument, however, is just as compelling. geologists point out that the rock here is sandstone, which naturally fractures along straight planes and horizontal bedding lines. The powerful currents and tectonic activity in this region, they say, are master sculptors capable of carving terraces, pillars, and what appear to be steps through entirely natural processes of erosion. They see a remarkable but purely geological wonder. The debate has simmered for decades, with scientific expeditions unable to deliver a definitive verdict. This is the true power of Yonaguni. It sits in that profound gray area, a physical object that challenges our need to separate the natural world from human history. Whether it is the eroded work of millennia of tides or the sunken plaza of a culture we have forgotten, it forces us to look deeper and question what we think we know about the ancient past. Yet the ocean's mysteries are not confined to ancient stone. Sometimes they appear as something profoundly unnatural, a shape so out of place it defies immediate explanation. This is the unsettling enigma of the Baltic Sea anomaly. In the summer of 2011, a Swedish team of ocean explorers led by Peter Lindberg was using side-scan sonar to search for old shipwrecks. What they found on the seabed, nearly 90 meters down between Sweden and Finland, was nothing anyone expected. Their sonar images revealed a massive, circular object roughly 60 meters across, about the size of a jumbo jet. But its shape was the true shock. It appeared as a perfect disk with a distinct raised ridge running around its edge, and behind it, a long, straight track or groove on the seafloor stretching for nearly 300 meters, like a runway or a skid mark from an impact. The imagery was so crisp and so bizarre that it immediately ignited a global firestorm of speculation. The most sensational theory, of course, was that this was a crashed, unidentified flying object, a flying saucer resting on the ocean bottom. Its circular form and that eerie runway trail seemed to support a narrative of a controlled landing or a violent crash. Others proposed it could be a secret World War II device, perhaps a German anti-submarine weapon or a lost piece of experimental technology. Yet geologists offered a far more mundane, though still fascinating, explanation. They suggested it could be a large glacial erratic, a boulder deposited by a retreating ice age glacier thousands of years ago, its strange shape carved by ancient meltwater flows. The plot thickened with subsequent expeditions. Divers reported that their electronic equipment, including satellite phones and sonar, would malfunction when directly above the object, only to work again once they moved away. Samples brought to the surface were claimed to contain metals not natural to the area. However, these findings have been heavily debated within the scientific community, with critics pointing to the high mineral content in Baltic Sea water as a likely cause for instrument failure. To this day, no definitive answer exists. The Baltic Sea anomaly remains a modern maritime riddle, a sonar ghost that challenges our categories. Is it a geological oddity, a forgotten relic of war, or something else entirely? Its greatest secret may be its ability to hover, perfectly balanced between the possible and the unbelievable, reminding us that the deep still holds shapes we do not yet understand. But not every secret is a grand monument or a sonar ghost. Some are small, intricate, and utterly transformative, discovered not by sweeping the seabed, but by sifting through the mud around a forgotten shipwreck. This is the story of the Antikythera mechanism. In the year 1900, sponge divers seeking refuge from a storm off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon a spectacular find. Littering the seafloor were marble and bronze statues, glassware, coins, and the broken timbers of a massive Roman-era cargo ship. It was an underwater museum, a time capsule from the 1st century BC. Among the more obvious treasures, a lump of corroded bronze and wood about the size of a shoebox seemed unremarkable. It was brought to the surface and largely ignored for months until it cracked open. Inside, researchers saw something that should not have existed. they saw gears, dozens of precise, interlocking bronze gears arranged in a complex system unlike anything known from the ancient world. For decades, this corroded lump baffled historians. It was clearly a machine, but what did it do? Through painstaking analysis, including advanced three-dimensional X-ray technology in the 21st century, the truth slowly emerged. This was not a navigational tool or a simple clock. It was an analog computer, a device of breathtaking genius designed to model the cosmos. By turning a hand crank on the side, a user could calculate the positions of the sun, the moon, and the planets against the backdrop of the stars. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses and even model the irregular orbit of the moon. Inscriptions on its casing served as a detailed user manual explaining the cycles of ancient athletic games like the Olympics. This one device was a portable planetarium, an astronomical calculator, and a calendar, all powered by a system of gears that would not be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The Antikythera mechanism forces a complete rewrite of history. It tells us that ancient Greek scientists and engineers, perhaps in the school of the great thinker Archimedes, had achieved a level of mechanical sophistication we never credited them with. They were not just philosophers with ideas, they were master craftsmen who could translate the mathematics of the heavens into a working machine of bronze and wood. Its recovery from a shipwreck is a poignant reminder of how fragile knowledge can be. This single artifact, lost in a storm 2,000 years ago and preserved by the sea's cold embrace, is a fragment of a technological lineage that vanished, a brilliant path not taken. It whispers of an ancient science that was far more advanced and far more beautiful than we ever dared to dream. The genius of the Antikythera mechanism shows us a world of sophisticated knowledge, but another discovery reveals a city of staggering, tangible wealth, lost not to time but to the sea itself. For over 1,200 years, the great port city of Heracleion existed only in ancient texts and a few scattered inscriptions. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote of its splendor, a mandatory stop for all trade entering Egypt from the Greek world, a place where colossal temples stood beside bustling harbors. Then, around the 8th century AD, it vanished from all maps and records, swallowed by the Mediterranean. It became a legend, a phantom, until the late 1990s, when underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio, working from clues in ancient texts, began to survey the murky waters of Abu Qir Bay near Alexandria. What his team found emerging from the silt was nothing short of a miracle of preservation. The sea had not destroyed Heracleion, it had entombed it. The first signs were colossal. A 16-foot-tall statue of the red granite pharaoh Hapi, a god of the Nile's abundance, lay peacefully on the seafloor. Nearby, a stunningly preserved statue of a queen, likely a Ptolemaic ruler, her features still regal and serene. But these giant sentinels were just the beginning. As the team carefully fanned away centuries of sediment, an entire cityscape materialized. They found giant stone slabs called stelae, some over 6 feet tall, inscribed with decrees in both ancient Egyptian and Greek, establishing the city's official name, Thonis Heracleion. They uncovered the remains of grand temples dedicated to the gods Ammon and Khonsu, their foundations still outlining sacred spaces. The harbor floor was littered with the evidence of relentless commerce, over 700 ancient stone and lead anchors from ships that had come from across the Mediterranean, and a scatter of gold coins and delicate bronze weights used by merchants. This was not a city in decline, it was a hub at the peak of its power, frozen in a moment of catastrophe. So what happened? How does a metropolis of such importance simply disappear? Geologists and archaeologists now believe a perfect storm of natural disasters doomed Heracleion. The city was built on the unstable clay and sediment of the Nile Delta. A series of powerful earthquakes, possibly followed by a tsunami, struck the region. This violent shaking caused a phenomenon called soil liquefaction, where water-saturated ground temporarily loses its strength and behaves like a liquid. The heavy stone buildings of Heracleion, its massive temples and statues, literally sank into the suddenly fluid earth as the land itself gave way beneath them. The waters of the bay rushed in, covering everything within a matter of hours or days. Heracleion's rediscovery is a direct window into a vibrant, multicultural crossroads, a place where Egyptian religion met Greek commerce, all preserved in stunning detail by the very mud that consumed it. It is a stark reminder that the ground beneath our feet is not always solid, and that the sea's greatest treasures are often entire chapters of human history waiting for the silt to be brushed away. While Heracleion shows us a city reclaimed by the sea, another formation seems to show a road built for it. Just off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, in water so clear and shallow you can wade through it, lies one of the most hotly debated underwater discoveries of the 20th century. Known as the Bimini Road, it is a striking line of massive, rectangular limestone blocks, each roughly 15 feet square, arranged in a perfect J-shaped curve that stretches for over half a mile along the seafloor. To the casual observer, it looks exactly like an ancient, submerged causeway or a collapsed wall, its stones neatly fitted and eerily purposeful. The discovery in 1968, made just as the prophecies of psychic Edgar Cayce had predicted something would be found near Bimini, sent shockwaves through the world of alternative history. Here, many believed, was a tangible piece of a lost world. Could this be a remnant of the legendary Atlantis, a road leading to a temple now long gone? Or perhaps evidence of a pre-Columbian transoceanic civilization, a people who crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus, leaving a marker of their passage. The visual argument is powerful. The blocks do not look random. They appear aligned with long, parallel rows and what seem to be support stones underneath, suggesting intelligent design. Proponents point to the precise, right-angled corners and the consistent size of the blocks as evidence they were cut and placed by human hands. They argue that the geology of the area shows tool marks and that the composition of the rock differs from the surrounding seabed. For decades, this has been a cornerstone of underwater mystery lore, a place where legend seems to have finally left a blueprint on the ocean floor. The scientific consensus, however, tells a different, yet no less fascinating story. Geologists who have studied the site extensively classify the Bimini Road as a prime example of natural beachrock formation. Beachrock is a type of sandstone that forms in the intertidal zone in tropical climates, where sand, shell fragments, and other sediments are cemented together by calcium carbonate, essentially natural concrete. As this layer forms and is later exposed by shifting sands and sea levels, it can fracture along natural planes of weakness. The fractures, influenced by stresses in the rock and erosion patterns, often create remarkably straight lines and right angles, a process known as jointing. The blocks are not cut or moved, they are in their original place of formation, having simply broken apart along these clean, geometric fractures. The long, curved line of the road is explained as an ancient shoreline where the beachrock formed and later cracked. So we are left with a classic standoff between perception and process. One side sees the unmistakable handiwork of a lost civilization, a pattern too perfect to be random. The other sees the magnificent, patient artistry of natural forces, which can, on occasion, create patterns that fool the human eye into seeing intention. The Bimini Road endures not because the mystery has been solved, but because it perfectly encapsulates our desire to find order and meaning in the ancient world, especially when it lies just beneath the crystal clear, inviting waters of paradise. It is a reminder that sometimes the sea's greatest trick is to show us exactly what we are hoping to see. The seafloor does not just hold cities and monuments, it also preserves moments of profound human connection, frozen in the chaos of disaster. Off the rugged coast of Uluburun in southern Turkey, a single shipwreck from over 3,300 years ago offers a more vivid portrait of the ancient world than any history book. Discovered by a local sponge diver in 1982, The wreck lay at a depth of nearly 50 meters, its wooden hull long gone, but its extraordinary cargo scattered across the seabed like a king's ransom. This was not just a sunken ship, it was a floating warehouse of the late Bronze Age, a snapshot of globalization from a time we often imagine as isolated and simple. The sheer weight of its trade goods is staggering. Archaeologists recovered over 10 tons of raw copper ingots alone, each shaped like an ox hide for easy transport, along with a ton of raw tin, the two metals needed to create bronze. But the true story is in the diversity. Mixed with these bulk commodities were priceless treasures, ebony logs from Africa, elephant tusks and hippopotamus teeth for ivory, large storage jars called pithoi filled with terebinth resin, and dazzling cobalt blue glass ingots, a material as precious as gemstones at the time. Among this wealth were personal items that speak of the crew and their connections, gold jewelry from Canaan, a stone ceremonial mace from the Balkans, a gold scarab bearing the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti, and finely crafted pottery from Mycenaean Greece and Cyprus. Here in one spot were the products of at least 7 distinct cultures from Nubia to the Baltic. This single vessel was a microcosm of a vast and intricate commercial web. It tells us that by the 14th century BC, the Mediterranean was not a barrier but a highway. Kings, pharaohs, and chieftains were connected by a sophisticated system of gift exchange and commodity trade, where raw materials flowed from resource-rich regions to powerful palaces, and luxury goods circulated among elites to cement alliances and display status. The Uluburun ship was likely a royal dispatch, a floating embassy carrying diplomatic gifts and state-sponsored trade goods between major powers, perhaps from the court of a Canaanite king to the pharaoh of Egypt or the Wanaks of Mycenae. Its loss was an economic catastrophe for its time, but for us, it is an unparalleled gift. This sunken time capsule forces us to redraw our mental maps, replacing isolated dots of civilization with a vibrant, interconnected world of sailors, merchants, and diplomats, whose lives and fortunes were woven together across the deep blue sea long before the concept of a global economy ever existed. The intricate trade network of the Uluburun ship reveals a connected ancient world, but what if an entire chapter of that world sank without a trace? Far from the Mediterranean, in the deep blue waters off the western coast of Cuba, a discovery emerged that promised a rewrite of human history on a continental scale. In 2001, a marine engineering company performing sonar surveys for the Cuban government captured startling images from an incredible depth of around 2,200 feet. The scans revealed a vast, seemingly organized complex on the ocean floor. The shapes were stark and geometric against the natural seabed. There were what appeared to be multiple pyramid-like structures, some even looking stepped. There were long, straight lines intersecting like a grid, reminiscent of urban roads or wide avenues. There were circular formations and what seemed to be large, collapsed blocks. The sheer scale and apparent order sent a shockwave through the world of alternative archaeology. Here, at a depth far greater than any known sunken city, was potential evidence of a lost civilization. The immediate, electrifying theory was that this could be a remnant of a culture that thrived when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower during the last ice age over 12,000 years ago. Some dared to whisper the old legend, could this be a piece of Atlantis, finally found in the Atlantic as Plato described? The depth was the key clue. It suggested an antiquity that was almost unimaginable, a city that drowned not in recent millennia, but in an epoch of melting glaciers. Mainstream archaeology, however, responded with deep skepticism. Geologists pointed out that the formations lay on a submerged granite plateau. Granite, under immense pressure and over eons, can fracture and cleave along straight lines and right angles, creating what are known as jointed formations. What the sonar interpreted as pyramids could be the peaks of natural, weathered granite outcrops. The grid-like patterns might be the result of these natural fracture lines intersecting, a common sight in quarries and mountain ranges on land. Without physical evidence from the site itself, they argued it was premature to call it a city. The central problem, and the reason the mystery persists, is that extreme depth. At over 2,000 feet, it is a realm accessible only by the most advanced remotely operated vehicles or specialized deep-diving submersibles. No detailed photographic reconnaissance or hands-on archaeological investigation has ever been conducted. The initial sonar images remain a tantalizing, solitary data point, a ghostly map of a place we cannot yet visit, so the Cuban underwater city hangs in a profound limbo. It is a set of shapes on a screen, a pattern that screams of human design to some and whispers of natural geology to others. Until a dedicated expedition can descend to that crushing darkness, retrieve artifacts, or capture crystal-clear video, it will remain one of the ocean's most compelling and untouchable secrets, a silent, sunken puzzle waiting at the very edge of our reach. Sometimes a legend waits centuries for the right moment to reveal its truth. On the morning of December 26, 2004, one of the most devastating natural disasters in recorded history struck the coast surrounding the Indian Ocean. The tsunami's waves, born from a massive undersea earthquake, brought unimaginable destruction. But in a cruel and paradoxical twist, the same force that erased so much also unveiled something ancient. As the tsunami's first wave receded from the shore near the town of Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu, India, it pulled back an immense curtain of water and sand. For a few fleeting minutes, local fishermen and residents witnessed a miracle. Where there had been only sea, now stood stone. They saw the carved head and shoulders of a massive lion emerging from the wet sand. They saw long, man-made walls, the outlines of complex structures, and rows of stone blocks, all laid out in clear, geometric patterns. Then, as the next towering wave rushed in, the sea reclaimed its secret. But the vision had been seen, and it electrified the community. For generations, they had known the folklore of the 7 pagodas. The stories said that Mahabalipuram, home to the magnificent shore temple built in the 8th century, was not always alone. It was said to be the last of 7 glorious temples, the sole survivor of a great port city. The other 6, along with much of the city itself, had been swallowed by the sea in a single night of divine punishment for its pride. Historians had long considered this a poetic metaphor, a way to explain the grandeur of the existing temple complex. The tsunami's brief exposure changed everything. What those fishermen saw was not a metaphor, it was archaeology. The Indian government, along with international teams, launched systematic underwater surveys of the area. Using sonar and diving expeditions, they began to map the seabed just a few hundred meters offshore. The findings were stunning. They discovered not just a few scattered stones, but the remains of a vast, submerged city. The surveys revealed long, collapsed walls, the foundations of numerous structures, and a large man-made harbor complex. They found stone blocks, pottery shards, and even a fallen stone lion, corroborating that initial shocking sighting. These were the ruins of a major port city from the Pallava dynasty, which ruled the region from the 3rd to the 9th centuries AD. This was not a mythical city, but a very real, bustling trade and religious center that likely succumbed to gradual sea level rise or a catastrophic event like an earlier tsunami. The legend of the 7 pagodas was not a fairy tale. It was a preserved memory, a cultural echo of a true historical catastrophe passed down for over 1,200 years. The tsunami of 2004 was a tragedy of incalculable scale, but in its awful wake, it provided a profound lesson that sometimes our oldest stories are not mere stories. They are maps waiting for the sea to momentarily step aside and show us where to look. Legends of sunken cities often speak of places reclaimed by the sea, but what of a city that dared to build upon it? On the remote island of Pohnpei in the Pacific, the ruins of Nan Madol rise from a shallow lagoon, a silent, staggering testament to an ambition that defies simple explanation. Known as the Venice of the Pacific, this was not a city on land, but a city of the water. Constructed between 12 and 1300 AD, its rulers, the Sordalor dynasty, engineered a capital unlike any other. They built atop a coral reef, creating 92 artificial islets by patiently piling countless tons of coral rubble and basalt stone into precise, rectangular platforms. These islets are separated by a network of canals so that the entire complex must be navigated by boat. The scale is immense, covering over 7 square miles. But the true, jaw-dropping mystery is in the materials. The outer walls and central tombs are built from colossal logs of prismatic basalt, a volcanic rock that naturally forms into hexagonal columns. These logs are not small. Some are 25 feet long and weigh an estimated 50 tons, the weight of a fully loaded semi-truck, and they are stacked log cabin style to form walls rising 40 feet high. Here lies the central, baffling question. How did the builders, with no metal tools, no pulleys, no wheels, and no draft animals, move these titanic stones? The nearest basalt quarry is on the other side of the island, across dense jungle and treacherous reef. Local legend provides a magical answer. It speaks of two brother sorcerers, Olasipa and Olasopa, who used a sacred dragon to levitate the stones through the air, commanding them to fly to the construction site. This enchanting story points to a truth. The feat seemed so impossible that only magic could explain it. Modern researchers propose more earthly, yet no less ingenious theories. Some suggest the massive logs were transported on bamboo rafts via a network of canals, perhaps using the tides to help float them into position. Others point to the possibility of a now submerged land bridge or a series of mangrove channels that have since vanished beneath rising sea levels. The most compelling idea involves a simple principle of buoyancy and coordination. By lashing the basalt logs beneath large outrigger canoes at high tide, crews of hundreds could have literally floated the stones across the lagoon, then used ropes, ramps, and an immense amount of coordinated human labor to painstakingly inch them into place. Nan Madol is a secret of the liminal space where land meets sea. It represents not a loss to the ocean, but a profound partnership with it. The lagoon was not an obstacle. It was the very foundation of their power, a moat, a highway, and a source of food and defense. The city's eventual abandonment, likely due to resource depletion and political upheaval, only adds to its haunting aura. Today, with parts of the complex succumbing to the rising waters and mangrove roots, Nan Madol feels like a monument to two kinds of mystery: the ancient ingenuity that built it, and the modern puzzle of how they ever managed such a staggering, watery feat. The ambition of Nan Madol is staggering, but it was not the only civilization to master the art of building with water. Far across the world, the heartbeat of the world's first democracy was its connection to the sea. Today, the modern port of Piraeus near Athens is a bustling hub of ferries and freighters, but beneath its busy waters lies a ghost, the original grand harbor of the ancient city-state. This was not just a dock, it was the vital artery of Athenian power, a marvel of military engineering and urban planning now mostly lost to the waves. Archaeological dives over the past few decades have begun to sketch the outlines of this sunken world. The most dramatic features are the massive fortified moles or breakwaters. These were not simple piles of rock, but colossal, carefully constructed walls that reached out into the Saronic Gulf, creating protected harbors for hundreds of warships. The remains of these moles, some built with blocks weighing several tons, still lie on the seafloor, marking the ambitious scale of Athenian defense. But the true secret of Piraeus lies in what was kept inside those protective arms. Divers have mapped the foundations of the famous ship sheds, long, roofed galleries built on ramps that led directly into the water. These were the parking garages for the Athenian trireme fleet, the swift, three-tiered warships that ruled the Mediterranean. Keeping these complex wooden vessels out of the water when not in use was essential to prevent rot and marine worms from destroying them, a logistical feat that speaks to immense organized power. The sheds could hold hundreds of triremes, ready to be launched at a moment's notice to project Athenian influence or defend against invaders. Beyond the military installations, the submerged shoreline also holds the footprints of ancient waterfront buildings, warehouses, and workshops that served a thriving commercial trade. This entire complex, a blueprint of classical Greek naval supremacy and civic life, now rests under several meters of water preserved in the silty bottom. The cause was not a sudden cataclysm, but the slow, relentless creep of rising sea levels since antiquity. As the Mediterranean has inched higher over the past 2 millennia, it has gradually drowned the very edges of the ancient port, swallowing the docks where Pericles may have walked and where merchants unloaded grain from across the empire. This slow-motion submersion, however, has acted as a perfect preservative. The mud and water have protected these stone foundations from being quarried for later buildings or destroyed by modern construction, leaving an underwater archaeological park of unparalleled importance. The lost harbor of Piraeus is a silent, aqueous archive. Every mapped stone of a mole, every traced outline of a shipshed, adds another line to our understanding of how a city of philosophers and playwrights also built itself into a maritime superpower. Its full map is still being drawn, a puzzle on the seafloor that promises to reveal in intimate detail how the ancient world truly worked when it met the edge of the sea. The debate over Yonaguni is not a simple yes or no. It is a clash between two compelling visions of the past. On one side stands the meticulous work of Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus who has spent decades diving the site. He does not see a natural formation. He sees a sunken city, and he points to a catalogue of specific, haunting features that defy easy geological explanation. There are what he identifies as carved faces in the rock, one resembling a moai-like figure. He points to reliefs he interprets as animals, including something that looks like a turtle carved into a platform. There are wide, flat areas he calls plazas, and channels that appear to be carved roads or waterways. Most striking is the feature he names the stadium, a sunken, oval-shaped area with stone steps surrounding it, looking uncannily like an ancient colosseum or a place for communal gatherings. For Professor Kimura, the sheer density of these seemingly cultural features, all within one complex, is overwhelming evidence. He proposes that the monument is a remnant of a lost Pacific civilization, perhaps connected to the legendary continent of Mu, a Pacific counterpart to the myth of Atlantis. He suggests the structure sank during a cataclysmic seismic event, a rapid submergence that could align with ancient flood myths from around the Pacific Rim. This theory paints a picture of a sophisticated culture, a forgotten chapter of human history lying just off the coast of Japan. The other side of the debate is equally grounded in science. Mainstream marine geologists like Robert Schoch, who has also studied the site, offer a powerful counter-narrative. They argue that the sandstone of Yonaguni is naturally bedded in horizontal layers and that it is cross-cut by vertical joints, a common geological pattern. The powerful currents in this area, they explain, can exploit these joints and bedding planes, eroding the rock along these straight lines and creating the sharp, stepped terraces and 90-degree angles we see. The so-called faces and animal reliefs are likely the result of random erosion patterns, enhanced by the human brain's innate tendency to see familiar shapes in randomness, a phenomenon called pareidolia, like seeing a face in the clouds. The stadium, they propose, could be a natural depression formed by blocks of rock falling away along joint lines. Their case rests on Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is often the correct one. They see the magnificent but entirely natural sculpting power of water, tides, and tectonics over thousands of years. This is why Yonaguni remains the ultimate test case. It forces us to ask, where does nature's artistry end and human intention begin? The site does not offer a clear, inscribed tablet to settle the argument. It presents only the silent, ambiguous stone itself, allowing both the dreamer and the skeptic to see exactly what they are looking for. This enduring mystery is its greatest power, holding a mirror to our own deep desire to find lost worlds beneath the waves and challenging us to define the very line between a natural wonder and a sunken secret. The composition of the object became the next battleground for truth. When the Ocean X team, the original discoverers, managed to retrieve small samples from the anomaly, they claimed the results were extraordinary. Their analysis, they stated, revealed metals like manganese and titanium, arranged in a way that suggested an alloy, not a naturally formed rock. Most provocatively, they reported finding traces of what they described as limonite and goethite, materials that can form under extreme heat. This fueled the fire, suggesting the object had been subjected to high temperatures, perhaps from re-entering the atmosphere or from some form of propulsion. It was the kind of data that seemed to point directly away from a simple geological explanation. However, this evidence immediately ran into a wall of scientific skepticism. The core issue was methodology. The Ocean X team's findings were not published in any peer-reviewed scientific journal, the standard process where other experts can scrutinize the data, the testing procedures, and the conclusions. Without that crucial validation, the results remained in the realm of claim, not confirmed fact. Critics argued that contamination was a real possibility, that the samples could have been altered during retrieval or analysis. Furthermore, geologists pointed out that the minerals mentioned are not unheard of in natural formations and could be explained by gradual precipitation from seawater or other long-term geological processes. So we are left with two starkly different narratives built from the same few pieces of stone. One narrative sees the composition as a smoking gun, proof of a manufactured object with a technological origin. The other sees it as an incomplete puzzle where the pieces have not been properly verified and could easily fit into a natural model. This conflict is the very essence of the anomaly's enduring power. It perfectly mirrors the human experience of deep-sea exploration itself, a venture where light does not reach and information is always fragmentary, filtered through machines and interpreted by hopeful minds. The theories attempting to explain it reflect this ambiguity. The glacial erratic theory is elegant in its simplicity, a massive boulder scraped from a distant bedrock carried by a continent-sized sheet of ice and deposited on the seafloor when the glaciers retreated thousands of years ago. Its strange shape, simply the work of ancient meltwater and time. The World War II relic theory taps into a more modern mystery, suggesting a secret Nazi device, perhaps a base for a revolutionary submarine or a mine-laying apparatus, lost in the fog of war and now resting in the silent dark. Both are plausible, yet neither is proven. The Baltic Sea anomaly, therefore, is more than a shape on a sonar screen. It is a lesson in how mysteries are born in the deep, not from what we find, but from the vast, echoing space between the data we have and the stories we need to tell. While the Antikythera mechanism is the star of the show, its shipwreck is a treasure chest that is still being opened, one careful dive at a time. The ongoing excavations at this site are a masterclass in modern underwater archaeology, revealing that the mechanism was just one piece of a much larger, richer story. For over a century, archaeologists have returned to the treacherous slopes off Antikythera, knowing that the bulk of the wreck lies buried under sediment at a dangerous depth. Their persistence has yielded astonishing new finds that paint a vivid picture of the ship's final voyage. They have recovered a stunning bronze spear over 2 meters long, too large for a handheld weapon, suggesting it may have been part of a grand statue of a warrior or goddess, perhaps lost overboard in the storm. A beautifully carved marble sarcophagus lid was also found, depicting a serene, sleeping figure, hinting that the cargo may have included funerary art for a wealthy Roman patron. Most hauntingly, the team discovered the scattered skeletal remains of at least one individual, a passenger or crew member who perished when the ship went down. Analysis of these bones can tell us about their age, health, and even where they grew up, putting a human face on this ancient tragedy. To reach these secrets, archaeologists are no longer limited by human endurance. They now employ an arsenal of cutting-edge technology. Divers have used the exosuit, a revolutionary one-atmosphere diving suit that looks like something from science fiction. It allows a researcher to descend to 300 meters and work on the seabed for hours without the risk of decompression sickness, essentially turning them into a deep-sea astronaut. Meanwhile, autonomous underwater vehicles and sophisticated robotic mapping systems glide over the site, using multi-beam sonar and 3D photogrammetry to create millimeter-perfect digital maps of every artifact and the wreck structure itself. These maps guide every delicate excavation, ensuring not a single clue is missed. Each new diving season is an act of profound anticipation. The sediment around the wreck is like the packing material of history, and every handful sifted could contain another revelation. Archaeologists hope to find more personal items, more pieces of the ship's structure to understand its design, and perhaps even additional fragments of the Antikythera mechanism itself, or other complex devices we never knew existed. Every amphora, every coin, every piece of jewelry adds a stroke to the portrait of first-century luxury trade, revealing the networks of wealth, art, and knowledge that connected the empires of Rome and Greece. This is not a closed chapter, but an active dig into the past, where the next dive into the blue gloom of the Aegean might recover an object that changes our understanding of the ancient world all over again. The true power of Heracleion was not measured in gold or grain, but in faith. As archaeologists brushed away the centuries of silt, they uncovered a city that served as a sacred gateway. The discovery of massive temple foundations dedicated to the Egyptian gods Ammon and Khonsu revealed a spiritual landscape of immense importance. These were not small shrines, but grand state-sanctioned complexes, suggesting Heracleion was a mandatory first stop for any Greek ship entering Egypt, a place where foreign merchants had to pay customs duties and, perhaps more importantly, offer tribute to the gods of the land. The sheer volume of ritual objects pulled from the mud tells a story of daily devotion. Hundreds of delicate bronze statuettes depicting gods and pharaohs were found, likely left as votive offerings by sailors praying for safe passage or giving thanks for a successful voyage. Even more evocative were the remains of ceremonial barges, boats used in lavish religious processions through the city's canals during festivals. Imagine the spectacle, a gilded vessel carrying the statue of a god, gliding through the waterways as the city's population watched from the banks, a fusion of Egyptian tradition and the cosmopolitan energy of a port. The spiritual life here was tangible and sometimes stark. Archaeologists found evidence of animal sacrifices, including the bones of bulls, a practice tied to the worship of gods like Serapis. These finds paint a picture of a living, breathing ritual center where the air would have been thick with the scent of incense and the sounds of chanting priests. Yet the single most important artifact for understanding the city's identity was not a statue but a stone slab. A giant stela over 6 feet tall was discovered perfectly preserved. Its inscription, carved in both ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and Greek, was a royal decree. It stated that all goods entering Egypt through the port of Thonis must be taxed. This was the definitive link. For centuries, scholars had debated whether the Egyptian city of Thonis mentioned in their texts was the same as the Greek city of Heracleion mentioned by historians like Herodotus. This one stela, resting on the seafloor for over a millennium, provided the proof, finally uniting the two names for the same magnificent sunken place. Heracleion was not merely a warehouse by the sea, it was a holy intersection where commerce and creed flowed together, where the divine was as present in daily life as the salt in the air, all now resting in the silent, sacred dark of the bay. The city of Heracleion was a grand, late chapter in a story that began much earlier, in a simpler but no less astonishing place. Lying just beneath the crystal waters of Vatica Bay off the coast of southern Greece, the ruins of Pavlopetri tell a different, far older tale. This is not a city of colossal statues or imported treasures, but a quiet, perfectly preserved blueprint of everyday life from over 5,000 years ago. Its discovery redefined our understanding of how early civilizations organized themselves, making it the oldest known submerged planned city in the world. While a local fisherman knew of the stones for generations, it was not officially recognized until 1967, when oceanographer Nicholas Fleming spotted its geometric shapes from an airplane. What followed was a meticulous, decades-long underwater mapping project that revealed a complete urban landscape frozen in time. Archaeologists found not just scattered walls, but an entire town plan laid out on the seabed. They traced the clear lines of stone-paved streets, some still with their curbstones intact, winding between the foundations of houses. They identified distinct neighborhoods, central courtyards where families might have gathered, and even what appear to be two-story buildings. Most poignantly, they mapped out dozens of rock-cut tombs integrated right into the city, a silent testament to the community that lived and died here during the early Bronze Age, in the shadow of the Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations. This level of preservation is breathtaking. We are not looking at a mythical metropolis, but at a real, functioning town. You can see where the main road led from the shore, how the buildings clustered for protection and community, and how the dead were honored within the city walls. It offers a unique, ground-level snapshot of how ordinary people, not just kings and priests, built their world at the dawn of European urban life. Its significance lies in its completeness, a rare intact fossil of social structure from a time usually known only from pottery shards and palace ruins. So why is it here, under 4 meters of water? The likely culprit is the same restless geology that shapes all of Greece. Pavlopetri was probably destroyed not by a single event, but by a series of powerful earthquakes. Each tremor would have caused sections of land to subside, allowing the sea to rush in gradually over centuries. The ground simply sank, tilting buildings and streets before the Mediterranean claimed them entirely. This slow-motion disaster was so complete that the city faded from memory, its name lost, its story written only in the orderly stones on the seafloor. Pavlopetri's quiet streets remind us that the ocean's secrets are not always about grandeur and gold. Sometimes the most profound discovery is a simple map of a forgotten morning, from a time when the world was young, waiting patiently beneath the waves for us to read its story. The quiet streets of Pavlopetri speak of ancient daily life, but the ocean floor also holds time capsules from a much later age of global empire and staggering wealth. In January 1752, the Dutch East India Company ship Geldermalsen, a massive vessel known as a retourskip, was completing its long voyage from Canton, China, back to its home port in the Netherlands. Its holds were packed with the most coveted luxury goods of the 18th century, a king's ransom in tea, silk, spices, and most importantly, delicate blue and white Chinese porcelain. As it sailed through the South China Sea, the Geldermalsen struck a reef in the Gaspar Strait and sank within hours. Most of the crew survived, but the ship and its priceless cargo vanished into the deep, its exact location becoming a whispered legend for over 2 centuries. That legend turned to reality in 1985, when British Marine salvor Michael Hatcher discovered the wreck site. What he brought to the surface was not just a shipwreck, but a phenomenon. The salvage yielded 150,000 pieces of pristine porcelain, an unimaginable haul of plates, bowls, cups, and vases, all made for the European market. Alongside this mountain of ceramics were 125 solid gold ingots, each a brick of pure wealth. This treasure, instantly christened the Nanking cargo, became one of the most valuable maritime recoveries in history. Its significance, however, went far beyond its auction price. For historians, this single cargo hold was a data set of immense value. The porcelain was not ancient art, it was mass-produced tableware for middle-class European families, revealing the scale and standardization of Chinese export manufacturing. The patterns, the shapes, the sheer volume told a story of a sophisticated, factory-like production system catering to Western tastes 250 years ago. It provided a tangible, quantifiable snapshot of globalized trade at the height of the Age of Sail, showing exactly what was being shipped, in what amounts and for whom. Yet the discovery of the Geldermalsen also plunged the maritime world into a fierce ethical debate that continues to this day. Michael Hatcher was a commercial treasure hunter, not an archaeologist. His primary goal was to recover and sell the cargo for profit, a perfectly legal endeavor under maritime salvage law. The artifacts were quickly auctioned in Amsterdam, scattering the collection to private buyers around the globe. To archaeologists, this was a catastrophe. A wreck site is a frozen moment in time where every object, its position, and its context holds information. When a site is commercially salvaged for its most valuable items, that context is destroyed forever. We learn about the gold and the porcelain, but we lose the chance to understand the ship's construction, the crew's personal belongings, the organization of the hold, and 1,000 other details that tell the human story behind the treasure. The Geldermalsen became the iconic case study in the conflict between commercial salvage and scientific preservation. It forced the world to ask a difficult question: who does history belong to? Is it the property of the finder to be sold to the highest bidder? Or is it a shared human heritage to be preserved and studied in its entirety for future generations? The shimmering porcelain of the Nanking cargo thus holds two secrets, one of global commerce in an age of tea and porcelain, and another, more sobering lesson about the fragile nature of history itself when it lies on the contested ocean floor. North of the modern coastlines, beneath the churning grey waters of the North Sea, lies a lost continent of Europe. This is Doggerland, a vast, fertile plain that for thousands of years was not seabed but home. During the last ice age, so much water was locked up in glaciers that global sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today. What is now the stormy North Sea was then a sprawling landscape of rolling hills, dense forests, meandering rivers, and marshlands, connecting the east coast of Britain directly to the Netherlands and Denmark. It was a rich ecosystem teeming with life, and for Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, it was a highway and a hunting ground. We know this not from legend, but from the nets of modern fishermen. For generations, trawlers working the rough fishing grounds known as the Dogger Bank have been hauling up strange cargo alongside their catch. They have pulled up the colossal tusks and teeth of woolly mammoths, the bones of giant elk and aurochs, and antler tools crafted by human hands. These artifacts are ghostly messages from a drowned world, proof that an entire country lies beneath their boats. Scientists, armed with this clue, have begun to map this sunken realm using seismic survey data originally collected by oil and gas companies. The resulting images are astonishing. They reveal the ancient topography in vivid detail, the winding channels of the River Thames's prehistoric ancestor, which they call the Channel River, cutting through the plain. They can trace the outlines of vast lakes, hills, and even coastlines. By analyzing cores of sediment pulled from the seabed, they can reconstruct the environment, pollen from pine and hazel forests, and the shells of freshwater mollusks. This data paints a picture of a dynamic, populated landscape. Archaeologists believe Doggerland was a key region for human migration and settlement, a place where communities followed herds and harvested the rich resources of wetlands and woods. Its end was not a single event, but a relentless, terrifying process. As the ice sheets melted at the end of the Ice Age, sea levels began their inexorable rise. Doggerland's flat topography made it uniquely vulnerable. The sea did not just advance at the coastline, it seeped inland, transforming rivers into estuaries and marshes into lagoons. The final blow likely came around 6,500 BCE, not from gradual creep but from catastrophe. Geological evidence points to a massive submarine landslide off the coast of Norway known as the Storegga Slide. This collapse triggered a devastating tsunami that would have roared across the remaining low-lying lands. Imagine a wall of water, perhaps dozens of feet high, sweeping through forest and camp, a final, violent punctuation mark to a millennia-long retreat. Within a few centuries, the last hills of Doggerland vanished beneath the waves. This was not the sinking of a city, but the drowning of a world, a geographical change so profound it severed Britain from the continent and reshaped the map of Europe forever. The story of Doggerland is the story of human adaptability in the face of a changing planet, a reminder that the coasts we know are not permanent, and that the most profound secrets are sometimes not lost cities but lost countries sleeping beneath the familiar sea. The drowning of Doggerland was a slow geological reckoning, but the sea can also deliver a verdict with the sudden, brutal force of a storm. In the 13th century, the world's largest empire set its sights on a chain of islands it could not conquer by land. Kublai Khan, the Mongol ruler of a domain stretching from the Pacific to Eastern Europe, demanded the submission of Japan. When the Japanese refused, he turned to the sea, launching two of the largest naval invasion forces the world had ever seen. The First Fleet in 1274 carried perhaps 900 ships and tens of thousands of troops. They landed in Hakata Bay, fighting fiercely before a sudden storm forced a retreat. 7 years later, Kublai Khan sent an even more colossal armada, a force historians estimate at over 4,000 ships carrying nearly 140,000 soldiers and sailors. It was a floating city of war, an unstoppable expression of Mongol might. As this second fleet massed in Imri Bay, the Japanese defenders faced certain annihilation. Then the sky darkened. For 2 days, a typhoon of legendary fury raged across the bay. The Mongol ships, many of them hastily built river vessels, were utterly defenseless against the mountainous waves and howling winds. The storm shattered the fleet, drowning the vast majority of the invasion force. To the Japanese, this was no mere weather event. It was a kamikaze, a divine wind sent by the gods to protect their sacred islands. This legend became a cornerstone of Japanese national identity, a story of miraculous deliverance. For centuries, the sunken fleets were just that, a powerful story. Then, in the 1980s, local fishermen off the island of Takashima began pulling up strange, heavy objects in their nets. They found massive, curved timbers and large stone anchor stocks, unlike anything used in Japanese boat building. Archaeologists were called in, and the sea began to give up its proof. Systematic underwater surveys revealed a sprawling graveyard of Kublai Khan's ambition. The seabed was littered with tangible evidence of the catastrophe. They found hundreds of these anchor stones, some weighing over a ton, still lying where they were cut loose in a desperate attempt to ride out the storm. They recovered ceramic explosive shells, the earliest known use of gunpowder bombs in naval warfare, and countless shards of Mongol and Korean pottery from the soldiers' provisions. Most hauntingly, they began to uncover the ships themselves, the waterlogged timbers of the vessels preserved in the silt. These wrecks are not just archaeological sites, they are war graves holding the remains of thousands of soldiers and sailors far from home. Every artifact recovered is a time capsule of 13th century Mongol naval technology and logistics. The construction of the ships shows a blend of Korean and Chinese techniques, built for capacity and speed, but not for the open ocean's worst fury. The personal items, like bronze mirrors, coins, and tools, speak of the individual lives caught in a grand imperial design. The sunken fleets of Kublai Khan are a stark monument to the limits of power. They confirm the historical accounts not with scrolls, but with physical, heartbreaking wreckage. They tell a dual story of an empire whose reach finally exceeded its grasp, and of a natural world that can, in a single furious night, rewrite the destiny of nations. The fury of a typhoon can scatter an empire's fleet, but sometimes water performs a more delicate, haunting magic. Deep in the jungles of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula lies a place where the very laws of nature seem to dissolve. This is Cenote Angelita, a massive, water-filled sinkhole that holds one of the planet's most surreal secrets, an underwater river. Divers descending into its clear, fresh water are met with a vision straight from a dream. About 30 meters down, the world suddenly shifts. A thick, cloudy layer materializes, looking exactly like a flowing riverbed. Within this layer, the ghostly silhouettes of trees and branches appear, as if an entire forest drowned and was preserved. Descending through this mist, a diver emerges into a second, deeper layer of crystal-clear saltwater. The effect is perfect, a complete river with its own banks and foliage, suspended eerily within the cenote itself. This is not magic, but a breathtaking geological phenomenon. The cloudy layer is actually a dense band of hydrogen sulfide gas, formed by the decay of organic matter that has fallen into the sinkhole over millennia. The gas, heavier than the freshwater above but lighter than the saltwater below, settles into a distinct liquid-like horizon. The trees are merely sunken logs and branches caught in this viscous chemical soup. It is a perfectly natural illusion, a trick of chemistry and light that creates a phantom landscape in the deep. For the ancient Maya who inhabited this region for centuries, such cenotes were far more than geological curiosities. In a land with few surface rivers, these deep, natural wells were the sole source of life-giving water, making them sacred centers of the community. But their significance plunged far deeper than practicality. The Maya saw cenotes as the literal mouths of the underworld, which they called Xibalba, or the place of fright. A descent into the dark, cool depths of a cenote was a symbolic journey into the realm of the gods and the dead. It was at these portals that they performed some of their most vital and solemn rituals. Archaeologists have dredged from the mud of cenotes like the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza a profound catalogue of offerings, golden figurines, exquisite jade carvings, intricately worked pottery, and human remains. These were not items carelessly discarded, but precious sacrifices carefully given. By depositing objects of immense value and sometimes human lives into these watery gateways, the Maya believed they were communicating directly with the deities of rain, fertility, and the underworld, pleading for balance in their world. Cenote Angelita, with its ghostly underwater river, offers a powerful key to understanding this spiritual landscape. The Maya, who had no concept of hydrogen sulfide layers, would have seen this phenomenon as undeniable proof of their beliefs. Here, before their eyes, was a literal river within the earth, flowing through the portal to Xibalba itself. The submerged trees might have been seen as the forests of the underworld. This visual confirmation, this natural marvel, would have cemented the cenote's status as a supremely potent sacred site. It transforms the location from a simple sinkhole into a cosmic map, a physical model of their mythology where the world of the living and the realm of the spirits visibly intersected. The cenote's secret river is therefore a bridge across time, a geological wonder that helps us see through the eyes of a lost civilization, understanding not just where they worshipped, but why they believed the very water beneath their feet was alive with divinity and shadow. The cenote's phantom river speaks to an ancient longing to see the unseen, a desire that would propel humanity into the depths with ever more daring machines. In 2019, a team from the Lost 52 project solved a 75-year-old mystery 1,400 feet below the Pacific. They found the USS Greyback, an American submarine lost during World War II. Resting off the coast of Okinawa, the Greyback had vanished in February 1944 with 80 sailors aboard, its final location incorrectly recorded by Japanese war records due to a single-digit translation error. For decades, families had only the open ocean as a grave. The discovery, led by undersea explorer Tim Taylor, used a revolutionary autonomous underwater vehicle equipped with side-scan sonar. This robotic sleuth combed the seabed in a methodical grid, its sensors painting a detailed picture of the darkness until the distinct, tragic shape of a submarine emerged from the data. For the families of the crew, this was not just historical closure, it was the return of a sacred place. They could now know exactly where their fathers, brothers, and uncles rested, honored and together. This modern mission of recovery echoes a tale from over 2,000 years earlier, a story that marks one of humanity's first dreams of conquering the deep. Ancient historians wrote of Alexander the Great, not just as a conqueror of land, but of the sea itself. According to legends recorded by writers like Aristotle, Alexander descended into the Mediterranean in a primitive diving bell, often described as a large glass barrel or a reinforced cauldron lowered by chains. For a miraculous few moments, the legend says, he observed a strange and alien world, a realm of giant sea creatures and mysterious landscapes before being hauled back to the surface. This account is clearly more myth than history, a symbolic story for a man whose ambition knew no bounds. Yet it perfectly captures the timeless impulse that would one day lead to sonar and submersibles, the deep human need to go down, to look, and to reclaim what is lost. From Alexander's mythical barrel to the high-tech hunt for the greyback, the thread is unbroken, a story of our refusal to let the sea keep its secrets forever, whether they are the resting places of heroes or the hidden wonders of an unexplored world. The ocean's power to erase is matched only by its power to conceal entire chapters of history. Around 1200 BC, the glittering civilizations of the late Bronze Age Mediterranean, from the Hittite Empire in Anatolia to the wealthy city-states of Canaan and the mighty New Kingdom of Egypt, faced a cataclysm. Ancient Egyptian temple walls at Medinet Habu tell a terrifying story in stone. They depict scenes of chaos, of foreign warriors in horned helmets and feathered headdresses, arriving in ships unlike any known, battling from the decks and swarming onto the shores. The inscriptions name them simply and ominously the Sea Peoples. They were not a single tribe, but a confederation of different groups with names like the Peliset, the Shekelesh, and the Denyen. They struck with a ferocity that toppled kingdoms, sacked great cities like Ugarit, and brought the Hittite Empire, a superpower of the age, to a sudden and utter collapse. Then, after decades of upheaval, they vanished from the historical record as mysteriously as they appeared. Who were they? Where did they come from? And where did they go? This is a secret the ocean keeps, not in a single shipwreck, but in the absence of a homeland. They left no capital, no royal tombs, no written records of their own. Their entire story is told by their victims, making them ghosts of the Bronze Age, defined entirely by the destruction they wrought. This lack of a clear origin has fueled endless speculation. Could their homelands have been islands or coastal regions that simply sank beneath the waves after their campaigns? Some theories place their roots in the islands of the Aegean, perhaps among the Mycenaean Greeks whose own palaces were burning around the same time. Others look to Sardinia, where the enigmatic Nuragic culture built thousands of stone towers and had a strong maritime tradition. The most tantalizing ideas stretch into the Atlantic, suggesting they were refugees from a collapsing society far to the west, perhaps even survivors from a lost land like Atlantis, pushing eastward in a desperate search for new homes. While these are speculative, they speak to a profound truth. The Sea Peoples were a phenomenon of the sea itself. They moved by ship, lived by ship, and fought by ship. Their power was naval mobility. If they had permanent bases, supply ports, or mustering grounds, those places would logically be on coastlines that were highly vulnerable to the earthquakes and rising sea levels that marked the end of the Bronze Age. It is entirely possible that the very harbors they sailed from now lie under meters of Mediterranean water, their evidence buried under sediment or eroded by currents. So the mystery of the Sea Peoples is ultimately a maritime puzzle. The ocean does not hold their city, it holds the answer to their identity. Every undiscovered shipwreck from that era in the Mediterranean could be a clue. Every submerged coastal settlement might be a missing piece of their story. They remind us that the sea is not just a preserver of history, it can also be the perfect cloak for an entire people, allowing them to emerge from the horizon, reshape the world, and then retreat back into the blue unknown, leaving only ruins and questions in their wake. High in the Andes, where the air is thin and the sky feels close enough to touch, lies a sea in the mountains. Lake Titicaca, straddling the border of Bolivia and Peru, is the highest navigable lake in the world. For the ancient civilizations of the Andes, this was no ordinary body of water. It was a sacred ocean, the very birthplace of the sun, the moon, and the first Inca rulers. Beneath its famously deep blue surface, the cold, dark waters guard one of the most profound collections of spiritual offerings ever discovered. Beginning in the 1980s, underwater archaeologists began to systematically explore the lakebed, and what they found was a deliberate, breathtaking gallery of faith. Scattered across the bottom, especially around the sacred islands of the sun and moon, were hundreds of ritual deposits. There were intricately carved stone boxes known as kochas, which were miniature representations of the lake itself, often containing offerings of tiny gold and silver foil figurines shaped like llamas or humans. They found ornate incense burners made of pottery and stone, used to send aromatic smoke skyward in ceremony. They recovered gold and silver pins known as tupas and fragments of beautifully woven textiles, all placed with intention. These were not objects lost by accident, they were gifts carefully given to the divine. The Tiwanaku civilization, which flourished around the lake from about 500 to 1000 AD, saw Titicaca as their cosmic center. Later, the Inca, who incorporated Tiwanaku's sacred geography into their own empire, believed the creator god Viracocha emerged from its depths to bring light and order to the world. They believed the first Inca, Manco Capac, and his sister wife, Mama Oclo, were sent by the sun god Inti from the depths of the lake to found their empire at Cusco. To make an offering here was to communicate directly with the source of all life and power. The lake's unique environment became the perfect conservator. The cold, dark, low-oxygen water at the bottom slowed decay to a near standstill. Textiles that would have turned to dust on land remained recognizable. Metal objects were protected from the corrosive effects of air. Each offering, resting in the silty dark, was frozen in the moment of its sacred purpose, creating an unparalleled underwater museum of pre-Columbian belief. These sunken treasures tell a story not of catastrophe but of profound reverence. They show a civilization that saw the landscape as alive, where a mountain was a god and a lake was a womb. Every gold figurine tossed into the deep blue was a prayer made solid, a contract between humanity and the cosmos, now resting in perfect, silent devotion thousands of feet above the sea. But the ocean's potential to hide entire civilizations is not confined to legend. In the murky, sediment-choked waters of the Gulf of Combat, off India's west coast, a discovery was announced that promised to shatter the timeline of human history itself. In 2001, the Indian National Institute of Ocean Technology was conducting a routine pollution survey when their side-scan sonar painted a startling picture of the seabed. The images revealed what appeared to be vast geometric formations spread across a 9-kilometer stretch. There were clear, right-angled structures that looked like the foundations of buildings, long straight lines resembling walls or roads, and even a grid pattern suggestive of an organized settlement, all submerged under nearly 40 meters of water. The potential implications were seismic. If this was a city, it was not just old, it was ancient beyond comprehension. The Institute organized follow-up expeditions, using dredges to bring samples up from the site. What they recovered fueled the fire: hand-worked pieces of pottery, polished stone tools, and fragments of wood. Most astonishing of all were the carbon dating results from the wood samples, which suggested an age of around 7,500 BCE. That date is staggering. It would place this settlement over 9,000 years old, predating the earliest known cities of Mesopotamia by more than 4,000 years. It would mean a complex urban society existed during a time when mainstream archaeology tells us humans were just beginning to form settled farming communities. The announcement was a thunderclap, suggesting a lost chapter of Indian, and indeed world, history lay drowned in the Gulf. Proponents argued this could be evidence of a pre-Harappan civilization, a precursor to the famed Indus Valley culture, or even a connection to ancient Sanskrit texts that speak of advanced societies lost to great floods. The discovery tapped into deep wells of national pride and historical curiosity, offering a tangible, scientific anchor for stories of a glorious, forgotten past. However, the academic world reacted not with unanimous celebration but with a storm of intense skepticism. Critics launched a multi-pronged challenge. First, they questioned the sonar images. The Gulf of Combat is an area of intense tectonic activity and powerful tidal currents. Geologists argued that the so-called structures could easily be natural formations of sandstone, carved and fractured by these relentless forces over millennia, creating the illusion of right angles and straight lines. The second, and perhaps more damning, critique focused on the artifacts. The dredging method used is notoriously imprecise, scooping up material from a wide area of seabed. Skeptics pointed out that the recovered pottery and wood could have come from much later shipwrecks or been carried by currents from elsewhere, settling on top of these ancient geological features. The carbon dating, while accurate for the wood sample itself, does not prove the wood was part of a building at that location 9,000 years ago. It could have been a log that floated out to sea and sank, becoming buried in sediment far from any human settlement. In essence, critics argued that the discovery conflated two separate things: very old natural rock formations on the seabed, and much younger archaeological material that had simply collected there by chance. The debate over the Gulf of Combat structures is a perfect storm of modern mystery. It sits at the volatile intersection of cutting-edge underwater technology, the human desire to find profound origins, and the rigorous, often slow, process of scientific validation. It remains one of the most hotly contested secrets of the deep, a ghost city on a sonar screen that asks us a profoundly difficult question. Are we seeing the birthplace of civilization, or are we seeing what we desperately wish to see, projected onto the ancient, indifferent stone of the ocean floor? The deepest secret the ocean keeps is not a city or a treasure, but a library. This vast liquid archive holds the most precise and continuous record of our planet's life, written not in words but in layers of mud, in the chemistry of coral, and in the very bones of ancient shipwrecks. This is the ocean's ultimate role as the silent scribe of Earth's history. To read it, scientists become detectives of the deep, extracting cores of sediment from the abyssal plains. Each core is a vertical timeline, a stack of pages made of silt and microscopic shells that have been raining down from the surface for millions of years. By analyzing the chemical composition of those tiny shells, they can reconstruct the temperature of the ancient sea. A shift in the type of pollen grains trapped in the mud tells a story of changing coastlines and climates, revealing when lush forests gave way to dry plains or when ice ages began their slow advance. Coral reefs are another volume in this library, their stony skeletons growing in annual rings like trees. The thickness and chemistry of each ring record the ocean's temperature, salinity, and even the frequency of powerful storms from centuries past. A layer of ash within a coral core can pinpoint the exact year of a catastrophic volcanic eruption that darkened skies across the globe. Even the wrecks we have discussed, like the Roman ships or the Geldermalsen, are data points. The wear on their timbers, the species of barnacles clinging to their hulls, and the way they are buried in sediment tell us about the sea conditions, currents, and erosion patterns of their time. In the cold, dark waters of the North Sea, the preserved peat bogs of drowned Doggerland hold preserved pollen and plant matter, a frozen snapshot of the landscape exactly as it was the day the sea took it. This transforms our understanding of the deep. The ocean is not merely a hiding place for lost artifacts, it is an active, living chronicle. It has been recording every chapter from the breath of the last ice age to the industrial pulse of the modern era in a language of chemistry and stratification. The ultimate secret, then, is that the greatest treasure is not gold but knowledge. The sea holds the baseline of our planet's health, the story of its rhythms and its ruptures. Learning to read these watery pages is perhaps our most urgent task, for within them lies the key to understanding our past and, more importantly, the profound changes shaping our future. The final mystery is not what we will find down there, but what we will learn from it. From legendary continents to very real sunken cities, we have journeyed across the globe to uncover 25 ancient secrets the oceans have kept. These mysteries remind us that history is not just found on land, it is written in the sediments, preserved in the deep, and waiting in the darkness. Each discovery, from the ghostly streets of Pavlopetri to the cosmic calculator of Antikythera, challenges the timeline of human achievement. They whisper of civilizations that mastered the sea, of cities that vanished overnight, and of technologies whose brilliance was lost for millennia. The ocean does not merely hide these stories, it protects them, holding them in a state of suspended animation until we are ready to listen. This vast, watery archive asks us to reconsider our place in a much longer, more interconnected human story. What do you think is the most compelling ocean secret? Let us know in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest puzzles.